As we gather today on International Women's Day, I want to acknowledge that there may be those of us among us whose hearts are heavy following Elizabeth Warren's withdrawal from the presidential race. In the spirit of hope and encouragement, not just for a more balanced representation in our future governments, but for the increased representation of women in all aspects of social and political life, I offer these words from the Reverend Gretchen Haley, Senior Minister at Foothills Unitarian Church in Fort Collins, Colorado. Though you have been warned and given plenty of explanations, reasons to do so otherwise, you have persisted to claim a life of joy and justice and to carve out this time for renewal of your own heart, despite the din demanding your attention, luring you towards fear and cynicism. You persist with gratitude for this day, this life that has been given, this chance to begin again despite all the forces of fragmentation, the disappointing ways we fail each other and fail ourselves. We must refuse to let grief undo us or to let our dreams get lost along the way. In spite of all the evidence, we keep showing up at the edge of our own longing. And then we keep going, remembering this duty we have to life. In a greater sense, this duty we have to each other, our children, and their children. This hope that is also a choice we make and a promise we fight for, to persist in kindness, persevere in compassion, and prevail in a life that is bound entirely to love. Come, let us worship together. is March 8th, celebrated globally since 1911 as International Women's Day. And this annual observance is intended to be a day to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. But the day also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. Today, and particularly this year, as we celebrate the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which gave American women the right to vote, it's important to note that the women's rights movement, which has had as its end goal the emancipation and conference of full rights of citizenship for all women, has been fought almost exclusively for the benefit of white middle-class women. Historically, women of color, lesbian women, poor women, indigenous women, and women from non-Euro-Western nations have been systematically excluded from participation in and denied the benefits sought by the fight for gender justice in the U.S. So even as we celebrate the achievements of women and congratulate ourselves on how far we've come, we cannot lose sight of how far we still have to go. Several weeks ago, under a resolution that passed unanimously in the Idaho Senate, March 14th was designated as Idaho Women's Day. The commemoration was proposed to recognize the importance of women in Idaho's past, present, and future. So why is it exactly that we feel the need to establish special days to celebrate women? Why can't the importance of women to our past, present, and future be acknowledged on a daily basis? And why are we still fighting for basic rights that will allow us to make those contributions in a more equitable way? Provisions such as equal pay for equal work, paid maternity leave, affordable childcare, unfettered access to family planning, and criminal justice laws that protect survivors of power-based personal violence and punish perpetrators. The uncomfortable reality is that the U.S. lags far behind many countries when it comes to equality for women. Almost 100 years after it was first introduced, we still have not ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, which would guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens regardless of gender. The U.S. is one of only 7 countries that has not yet signed the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, which is an international Bill of Rights for women adopted by the majority of United Nations countries in 1979. The World Economic Forum ranks the United States 51st out of 149 countries in terms of gender equality. So clearly, we still have work to do. And this work will take all of our efforts, not just those of the women who have always been at the forefront. Famzile Malambo Nguka, the executive director of UN Women, emphasizes that the benefits of gender equality aren't just for women and girls, but for everyone whose lives will be transformed by a more just and fair world that provides access to opportunity and equal rights for all citizens to participate fully in social, political, and economic life. As dishearteningly slow as progress can feel sometimes, it's not all doom and gloom. In the past 2 decades, there have been some positive changes to celebrate. Maternal deaths across the world have dropped by 38% since the year 2000. 131 countries have made legal reforms to support gender equality and address issues of gender-based discrimination. More than 3/4 of countries have laws against domestic and relationship violence. And more girls are in school than ever before, with more women globally now accessing post-secondary education than men. However, despite improved school enrollment, 1 in 10 young women today are still unable to read and write. This has to change in order for girls to fully own their power, take their place in the world, and play a vital role in the development of technology and innovation. So even though there's undoubtedly been progress, no country in the world has yet managed to achieve gender equality. Our best just hasn't been good enough. Challenges remain for all countries, although many of them are not insurmountable. Meanwhile, girls are making no secret of their disappointment with our stewardship of the planet, the unabated violence directed against them, and the slow pace of change in fulcrum issues like education. Young women are stepping up to leadership like never before. We've been inspired by the courage of Emma Gonzalez, who survived the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida, and became an outspoken activist for gun control, making high-profile media appearances and helping to organize the March for Our Lives. Swedish high schooler Greta Thunberg has become the poster girl for environmental activism on climate change, addressing world leaders at the United Nations and leading campaigns and rallies across the world. The Me Too and Time's Up movements have led to hundreds of perpetrators of sexual violence finally being held accountable for their actions. And as women rise, so the rules on gender conformity are being rewritten, making a space for transgender people to step forward and claim their rightful space. While many of us have mourned the loss this week of a strong female presidential candidate, we must continue to push for equal representation of women at the tables of power. A fundamental reason we have not yet achieved gender equality in every realm is that women's and girls' voices are too often excluded from global and national decision-making. There are isolated examples of the gender scales tipping in the political arena in countries such as Rwanda and Finland, but the fact remains that 3/4 of all parliamentarians in the world are men. One proven solution to create balance in country systems of governance is to introduce legally binding quotas for women's political representation. Nearly 80 UN countries have already successfully done so, and a few member states have gender-balanced cabinets and explicitly feminist policies. We need to see more of this in both public and private sectors, where overall the proportion of women in managerial positions remains around 27%, even as more women are graduating from university. Economic equality seems far from achievable still, as women and girls use triple the time and energy of boys and men to care for their households. The burden of domestic labor costs them equal opportunities in education, in the job market, and in earning power. It's a driver of repeating poverty. Young women raising families are 25% more likely than men to live in extreme poverty, affecting millions of young children with impacts that last into later life for both mother and child. We urgently need policies that promote more equality in childcare responsibilities and that provide state support to families and those who work in informal economies. In its current 3-year strategic plan, UN Women outlines a comprehensive and dynamic set of global norms, policies, and standards on gender equality and the empowerment of women, with 4 interdependent and interconnected outcomes. Number 1, that women lead, participate in, and benefit equally from governance systems. Number 2, that women have income security, decent work, and economic autonomy. Number 3, that women and girls live a life that is free from all forms of violence. And number 4, that women and girls contribute to and have greater influence in building sustainable peace and resilience and benefit equally from the prevention of natural disasters and conflicts and humanitarian action. So this seems like a pretty huge endeavor. How are we possibly going to get there? So here are some suggestions that you can start to work on right now. We have to elect more women. A proven way to overcome systemic barriers for women's success has been increased participation by women in local, regional, and national legislation as empowered change agents. So when women run for local or national office, vote for them instead of debating their electability. Support with your time, talents, and financial contributions organizations that advocate for and provide comprehensive women's health care and family planning. Lobby actively for legislation and corporate policies that support affordable childcare, paid parental leave, flex time scheduling, and equal pay. Step up your efforts to end gender-based violence. The UN has found that globally, 1 in 3 women will experience violence in her lifetime, with most violence against women perpetrated by a current or former intimate partner. Speak out against power-based personal violence and commit to doing something to help end it. Help raise the next generation of girls with exposure to images, role models, and messaging that expand their dreams and future aspirations. Make every effort to hire more women, and when you do, mentor and guide them into positions of leadership. Be a good ally to your women colleagues. Give proper value to women's work. The unpaid work that women and girls do provides a foundation for the global economy, and this fact needs to be highlighted more in the media, in the private sector, and in communities. Gloria Steinem, renowned feminist activist and journalist, once famously said, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." So even while we may feel royally pissed off and radically impatient for change, we cannot give up. We must continue to cultivate support from allies and partners who are ready to tackle barriers to gender equality. We're starting to see the driving will for change across generations and countries. We're locating issues that unite us and that offer opportunities to disrupt the status quo. Last year, on International Women's Day, writer and activist Rebecca Solnit declared, "This is a revolt for which we have been preparing for decades." Or perhaps it is at the point at which a long, slow, mostly quiet process suddenly became fast and loud. Now it's time for women to lead. I invite you to join me in working towards a world where women's voices matter, where women's bodies are their own, and they can make the choices they need to for their health and their families, where violence based on gender becomes a thing of the past, and women and girls are no longer bought and sold as disposable commodities, where women have access to the economic opportunities they need to contribute financially to the security of their future and to that of their children. This is the world I know that we want, and not just for us, but for generations yet to come. So may it be.